Hi, so the interesting thing about 3D printing, its most interesting applications are those where you're not really aware of the 3D printing at all. That's not what's center stage. What's center stage is that it's solving a problem that traditionally would have been impossible using all the traditional technologies, and it gets us to a place where we can solve things that have been unaddressable otherwise. Here's an example. 7 years ago, this girl walked into school, and she was wearing this cool thing on her arm, and all of her friends wanted to find out where they could buy one. And so she said, well, you can't buy it because it was 3D printed, and it was 3D printed for her alone. And so the next best thing they asked, could they try it on? And she said, no, because it was based on a 3D scan of her arm, so even though it fit her perfectly, it wouldn't fit anyone else at all. And besides, the doctor and the designer who put it on her told her not to take it off for 6 weeks because the week before she had fallen off a swing and busted her arm. So to the best of our knowledge, she became the first person ever to have a fracture stabilized with a 3D printed brace. And after 6 weeks, she did recover, and she became the first person ever to not want to give her fracture brace back when she was done with it. Anybody who's had it knows you don't want to touch those with fire tongs when you're done with them. She actually tanned her name into her arm. So all of her friends wanted to try it on. We made 2 for her so that every night she could put one in the dishwasher once the bone had started to set, and she woke up to a clean, fresh, dry, semi-sterile cast. That has never happened before. It was fortunate that she did heal because she was the daughter of our A-round investor, so we didn't have to leave the country in a hurry. And within 2 weeks, 2 daughters of our B-round investor had fallen down the stairs, both doing their tibias. This says everything you need to know about the competitive and self-sacrificing nature of venture capitalists. They were treated, I think they were the second and third humans ever treated with fracture braces. But I had the amazing good fortune last year of tearing my TFC ligament in my wrist. And so I was facing the idea of having a full bicep to knuckle monster cast for 6 months of recovery. And I'm thinking, of course, this is an amazing opportunity. And once the pain subsided, I was really excited about diving into this. And so I did what anyone would do. We took the MR data, sent it to Katie Weimar, who spoke on Monday, and her team parsed it, took the DICOM data, and I got to see what a TFC ligament was, where it should have been, and reviewed this with my doctor. And then we put my arm in the homebrew scanner that my team designed at 3D Systems, and we took an external morphology scan. It took about a second to get my arm. With that, we used a haptic device, also designed by my team at 3D Systems, and we marked out, using palpation and the haptic sculpting device, we marked out all of the blood flow, all the nerves, and all the bony prominences where we can't have contact onto the model, and using that as a reference, we then designed a cast that would go around it. We designed a number of different versions. This was the final version. We called it the bikini, and the notion there was that it covered the important stuff and absolutely nothing more. And that's an important approach to take when you are creating something that's exoskeletal, that's 3D printed, and a solid part. Because anything extra is going to be gratuitous, and it's going to be painful and lead to sweating and everything else. You really can take a very minimal approach. This was a Munster-style cast, so it was 3-point fixation on the forearm and the wrist, and the brace along the back. I convinced a very reluctant doctor to put it on me 3 days after the surgery. And he was very doubtful at first, but here's the thing that started to become apparent. Every day for my treatment, I was able to put hot and cold compresses directly onto the surgical site. So I could reduce swelling, increase blood flow. That really increased possibly they accelerated the treatment, but increased the overall comfort of the process. I was able to put scar reduction cream directly on the surgical site. I was able to massage the scar tissue as it built up on the bone. And I did acupuncture every Saturday because I live in Marin. And perhaps the greatest dividend of all was I showered every day of the treatment. Nobody has ever done that when they have a full knuckle to bicep cast. I actually went scuba diving 2 months into the treatment in Mexico. Again, these are things you simply can't do when you're wrapped up in fiberglass and cotton that can never get wet. This is ultimately what I'd like to see, and this is a concept that my team came up with. It doesn't currently exist. It's the idea of an accurate snake robot, of non-Cartesian modeling, of non-planar substrate, in this case the human body. And we did it as a kind of science fiction exploration. But it turns out that everything here is potentially going to happen. It's all in development in one lab or another. So this might not be too far off that you'd actually have a printer like this in your bathroom, diagnosing and fixing you right there on the fly. So we focused the company that I started 7 years ago, called Bespoke, on a number of different things, including scoliosis treatment. Because as Katie mentioned on Monday, it's an especially cruel problem to have. It afflicts mainly girls 8 to 10 years old, and this is state-of-the-art treatment. They told us that it's compliance-based, which to me, I'm a designer, I'm not in medicine. Compliance-based to me means that you're trying to get an 8-year-old girl to do something that she absolutely doesn't want to do. What could possibly go wrong? So the goal is not then to improve the medicine. The medicine works. It's the compliance that doesn't work. So we had to change the process. We 3D scan her with a handheld 3D scanner. We use a haptic manipulating device to sculpt, to change it, to push and pull. And then we 3D print the scoliosis brace. Now, the dividends here are you get something that's invisible under clothing. That's really important to the integrity and to the quality of life of the patient. It is fully ventilated, so she doesn't overheat. But the most important thing is she gets to choose the pattern, because with 3D printing, again, complexity is free. So she chooses the pattern. Now, choosing patterns is something you do in fashion, not something you do in medicine. Medicine gets imposed on you. Fashion is something you have some agency in. So this gives her agency in the process. It gives her some authorship of the final product, gives her more of an emotional connection. So we're able to make something that's also beautiful and very complementary to her. We debuted this in Paris a year ago last month at the Louvre, and we had many women coming up to us and saying, "This is lovely. How can I get one?" And I said, "Fantastic. Do you have scoliosis?" And they said, "No. How do I get it?" And to me, that says something. That means perhaps we're on the right track. This is the next generation we've been working on for a couple of years. It's the idea that not only can we push the spine into the correct orientation, but we can also do it without locking out the whole thoracic. We can let her bend, torque, flex, and basically use her spine so we're not fully locking out her body. And ultimately, we can collect data from this and get an accumulation of knowledge so that it's not simply a craft and a black magic that defines scoliosis treatment over time. Now, a goal of mine for many years has been to address the vast gulf that exists between the people in the world who need prosthetic limbs and the very few doctors who are capable of creating a limb that's ready for these people. So, been focusing on letting 3D printing fill that void. The idea that you can take a 3D scanner, which is now ubiquitous. Everyone in this room has a very adequate 3D scanner right there in their pocket. Take the 3D scanner, everybody becomes then a front-end care provider of sorts. You take the data, load it to the cloud, and the 3D printer does all the work. It can print the product and send it to the person. And suddenly they have a very high-quality prosthetic limb. Now, there are challenges with this one. This relies on a very expensive machine. This is a $500,000 machine because the leg is load-bearing. Those costs will drop, but they're not dropping too fast. So we're going to have to see what happens and hope that this is something that can be addressed in the future. This particular guy was the victim of a terrorist bombing in the Philippines. And we got him up and walking on our leg. What you get out of it is contralateral symmetry, so that the body has its symmetry. There's a sociological and a psychological value to that current prosthetic limbs don't tend to offer. You get the complexity of, in this case, a multi-bar linkage knee. You get a leg that looks beautiful, so it again addresses some of the social stigma that usually accompanies prosthetic limbs. It is printed locally. It is curbside recyclable. We put number 7 on the heel, and it's dishwasher safe. I've printed a number of these legs, and they've put many, many miles hiking through the mountains. Again, this is a work in progress, hoping it will become the standard of care at some point. This is an exploration, just seeing, can you actually change the vernacular so that it looks really beautiful as well? When John's wife saw this leg, she said, "Wow, I like that leg so much better than that one." And then she said, "Can you make him 2?" And we laughed at that. And then John thought about it, and he said, "Yeah, nobody says that to an amputee. That's never the case." So it addresses some of the social issues, some of the discomfort that surrounds prosthetic limbs. One of the groups I spend most time with now is called Enable. And they're kind of summed up by this odd string of words here. Crowdsourced, nimble, philanthropic, distributed manufacturing. Those words haven't been put in that order because they can't. Those are all contradictory words. But what they distill down to is peer-to-peer manufacturing. The thing that we're going after is something called amniotic band syndrome, where between 1 and 2,000 kids in the world is born without fully formed hands, usually hands along these lines. The especially cruel part is that most of the kids are in developing countries, where they're that much less likely to get a complex kinematic hand that they need, and their quality of life depends that much more on them getting a functional hand. What they really need is one of these $100,000 bionic hands, but they'll never see anything like that. They'll probably never see anything at all. But along comes the consumer-grade FDM 3D printer. This is one I designed with 3D Systems. These are now within 10 miles of 1 billion people on Earth. And they're not running all the time. They have vast excess capacity. What that tells us is there is an abundance of manufacturing capabilities in the world that's completely untapped. If we can tap into that, we can solve a lot of problems. So suddenly, these kids, all they need to do is be able to download a file and print it, and they become a manufacturing site. Here's an example. This guy, born with ABS, had a hand made for him by a girls' high school group. They actually designed it to look like Wolverine's hand from X-Men. Again, giving him that emotional connection to his hand, which is very important. It's an object-oriented modeling, and it's open source. So anybody can modify the CAD model as they like. This kid asked if we could give him another couple inches so he could reach things on higher shelves. So we can, because again, open source, we can do anything we want with our files. This guy, Cool Hand Luke, he realized what most of us hominids have come to accept, which is 2 thumbs are better than 1. And he's got much better grip as a result. And what's to be seen is if he goes full bore, of course, and develops a base 12 number system and really advances the human species from there. This is where I spend most of my time now, is working on the software that will connect the person in the field with this excess capacity of manufacturing in the world. We're trying to create an app that hopefully will end up on a smartphone so that anyone anywhere in the world with a smartphone becomes the front-end provider. And that could be Doctors Without Borders, it could be a Peace Corps volunteer, and the whole process is gamified and simplified to the fact, to the level where you can't do it wrong. And it simply loads the files to the queue. Anyone in the world with a 3D printer can then create that hand. This hand, the K1, was designed by Evan Kuster, and the goal here wasn't just to solve the basic functionality of turning wrist flexion into grasp. That's the easy part. He's going beyond that to create a thing of sculpture, a thing that really gives the person a quality of life, to step up that much higher on the Maslow's hierarchy of prosthetic devices. Create something that's actually beautiful and very complementary to the person. And if you really want to get some karma points, you can print it on the EcoCycle. I co-developed this with will.i.am, and it prints the hands, in this case, out of post-consumer waste Coke bottles. And so you can essentially take Coke bottles out of the waste stream and create prosthetic limbs for kids in developing countries with it. We're working on an effort now where we can use the higher-end printers, in this case the selective laser sintering machines, to create a higher-grade hand that will be filled with motors and Arduino sensors and the whole deal. And it won't be free, so it won't fall into the same camp as the Enable hands, but it'll be vastly, vastly cost-reduced. It'll be fully customized, and it'll just look really cool. So to us, that is really the definition of what exponential medicine is tapping into the vast capacity of manufacturing and problem solving, connecting it with the vast problems of the world, simply by adding a new technology and employing some of the devices that are now at our disposal to really solve some of the world's really big problems. Thanks a lot for your time.